sign or something up, and telling folks that you're in a webinar and you're not going to be disturbed or anything like that. And also make sure that you've got something to write on, maybe to take notes. I know a lot of you are asking about the presentation and you can't print it. It's just being revamped. Everything you see today, when it comes back up, they take them down every so often for editing and seeing if there's better pictures that could go here or there, better explanations and so on. So I'm sure it'll be back up soon. I know the bulk of them are going to be back up rather shortly. In fact, I think there's quite a few that are on our website now. So don't be discouraged. It'll be back up there very soon. It's just this is such a long presentation that it does take quite a bit of time to actually go through it and really edit it and do it justice. So with that being said, remember too that you need to be here for 80% of the class to get full credit for it. So if it's an 80 or if it's a 60-minute course, 6/8 is 48, so that's 48 minutes. That's how we calculate it. Real easy. So make sure you stay with it, because if you drop out, then you're not going to get full credit for it. So, and I don't want to see that happen. All right. Anything else? Yes. So please be patient with Dee getting the certificates out. It's not FedOsh, so these don't, they're not available for download as soon as the thing is done. It does take a little bit of time to get them, but turnaround time's pretty quick. We ask for typically 3 or 4 weeks. I know there's a lot of people out there. It's like, oh, this is the last class I need to get my mesh, and look, we'll do the best we can to get it done as quick as possible. So that'll be good. All right, so let's go ahead, and we're rolling along here. So let's get started with respiratory protection. So this is 29 CFR 1910 134. Now, when we talk about respiratory protection, it covers a lot of different things. So the first thing is just to, make sure everybody realizes, this is general industry, 1910. But, this standard actually applies pretty much across the board because you can see shipyards, marine terminals, longshoring, construction, they all have respiratory guidelines. So, respirators are used in those industries as well. So, this isn't something that just singles out solely general industry and doesn't affect anyone else. It's actually, it touches everybody because if you are going to wear a respirator, you do need to have a respiratory program. And we're going to go over, how to take care of it and how to do it. It's actually very straightforward. There are a lot of different companies out there that sell all kinds of kits and things like that, and those things can be helpful many times. Again, it just depends on what you need and what you're looking to get out of your program. The biggest thing that, if nothing else, I really want to stress is make sure that you audit your program every year. Take a good look at it. Number one, make sure that you need it. And if you still need it, then the second thing is make sure that everything in your program is still applicable to your needs. Did you get any new chemicals? If so, do all your filters cover everything? Sometimes you might find it's more economical than to stock one filter that can do a whole lot of stuff, like it can do ammonia and organic vapor and all kinds of different things, rather than storing a whole bunch of boxes of a whole bunch of different things, right? It's like, well, this one's special for organic vapor, and this one's special for ammonia, and this is special for chlorine. They make ones that cover the whole gambit. And maybe those are more expensive, or maybe they're less money. But the thing is that when you do open these things, they do have an expiration date once they're activated. And so, it's kind of like my mom likes those egg beaters, right? And so every time we open a carton of egg beaters, I'm like, all right, now, this means, we're gonna have to have an omelet or, some sort of eggs next several days, because once you open it, then you got 7 days to get rid of it, or 14 days. I forget exactly what it is, but whatever it is, the expiration date that's printed on the carton no longer applies once you open it. And it tells you that on the carton. Well, the same thing is true with these little respiratory filters. Once you open them and you start using them, then you're going to have to go ahead and use it. So uh, let's see. It seems like someone has no audio. Uh, let's see if I can help this person. And here we go. There you go. See, there's the thing. Audio is good here too. Excellent. All right. Good. So everybody can hear me. Fantastic. So hopefully we can get this resolved for this fella. All right. Moving on. So we look at the organization of the standard. It's really nice the way that this thing is laid out. And you see, it's pretty straightforward. A through O. A lot of pieces here, a lot of pieces. The one thing, though, of all of this that I can say is probably one of the very best parts of the standard is the appendices. A lot of times, all of these standards are very much legal based and they're legalese. So it says, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt do that, and that kind of thing. With this actually gives some very, very, very good instruction in the appendices on fit testing, on making sure all your seals work in the mask, how you clean it. They even give you a medical questionnaire. Um, there's also information for employees uh, that choose to wear a respirator when maybe respirator is not really required, or you don't have that program, but they still want to wear something. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because that is one of those little tricky areas. Now remember, a respirator is a respirator, and when we get into some of this little confusion, which we'll talk more about later, is when we get into these uh, surgical mask style respirators and which ones are dust filters and which ones are respirators. And it should be identified on the box. There could be a lot of confusion about that. All right, so main things that we're going to talk about today. Uh, what's a respiratory program? How do I put one together? How do I figure out what kind of respirators I need? And, medical evaluation. How in the world do we get that done? Also, how do we use these things? How do we maintain them? How do we take care of them? How am I going to train my folks on using these? All these questions and more will be answered. All right. So, 10 parts of an effective respirator program. So we're going to go through these and work through them. This is a very handy, uh, PowerPoint. So I definitely would recommend try to find it and come back to the site and download it once it's been updated, because it's a good one and it will definitely help you. So first thing is you got to have someone in charge. In this case, it looks like Lamont's in charge. So actually he's the head of our recognition program. He's the head of the STAR program. So if you're looking for STAR, this is the guy to talk to. All right. So that person that's in charge, it's a written program that has to be implemented, by a trained program administrator. What does that mean? Well, they've got to be qualified to do the job, first of all. That means they have to know what hazards are there in the workplace and how to mitigate them. Can we use engineering controls or can we use administrative controls? Is there anything that we can do to take folks out of harm's way without going to the very last resort, which is PPE? Because remember, PPE is always our last resort choice. If we can't do anything else, nothing else we can do, then we go to PPE because that's our last defense. Now, if we decide, okay, we're going to have to use a respirator, what kind of respirator do we need? Do we need a half mask, a full mask? Maybe we need an SCBA. You know, what do we need and how are we going to address that? That's the big thing. So you need somebody that's a decision maker and you need somebody that's trained because they need to know not only how to identify those hazards, but how to address those hazards. Okay, very important. Second part is medical evaluation. Your folks have to be medically evaluated. Why? Because when you are wearing a respirator, uh, here it says physiological burden. What does that mean? Well, uh, if you ever think of like on a, we just had a series of really cold days, right? And it can get hard to breathe. Well, really dusty conditions, it gets hard to breathe. Anything that blocks your nose, you put a towel over your face. You put anything more than like a bandana. For those of you that are Old West bank robbers, you know what I'm talking about. Anything more than something just loose fitting over your face, it is going to impair your breathing. So that adds additional stress on your respiratory system. So what does that mean? Does that mean I've got to be an Olympic athlete, some sort of marathon runner, do a 5K every day? No, that's not what that means. What it does mean is that you have to be cleared by a physician to make sure that when you actually are wearing this device, that it's not going to put an undue stress on your body that's going to cause you more harm than do you good, right? So what does this depend on? Obviously the type of respirator that you're using. Some are more strenuous than others. Where are you working? What kind of conditions are you working in? That has a great deal to do with it. You may be in conditions that are just so incredibly dusty, and maybe there's a lot of dust, and maybe there's a lot of, say, solvent, right? So you're wearing a solvent respirator, with solvent cartridges, organic vapor cartridges, and there's so much dust though they're constantly getting clogged, and it makes it harder and harder and harder for you to breathe because it's like somebody having a pillow over your face. Okay, that can put a lot of stress on the body. You know, pulmonary, breathing, a lot of stress there. It's like I said, having a pillow over your face. Once this happens, and you're exerting more energy, then now it becomes a cardiovascular thing because now your blood's pumping, your heart's having to work harder, and so now your resting heart rate, you're working, number one, so it's increased, and now you're having to breathe through this, filter, and so now your heart rate's going to go up even more. Heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, right? You're pumping more blood. More blood pumping means your body temperature is going to go higher. Now, there are other things here, senses, psychological irritation and allergy. Big thing with this is wearing a respirator is not a natural thing. For some of us, it's not a big deal. I know that, when I was a kid growing up, right? A lot of kids play sports, and the first time you put a helmet on for a sport, whether it's for football or for hockey or for hurling or lacrosse, everyone has a different sensation, right? I know, like the big drive in all of these sports and everything we do, right, is lighter and lighter and lighter gear. I can tell you, the lacrosse helmet that I wear today is so much more comfortable than the ones that I used to wear in high school that, were absolutely ridiculous. The ones today, they're lightweight, they're incredible. They can really take a hard blow to the head and it really does nothing. Stick comes across, smashes you, you don't even feel it. It's fine. But for some people, a helmet like that can make them feel very claustrophobic. And when that happens, now they're thinking more about the claustrophobic nature of this than they are what they're doing, and they're not focusing on their task. Same thing is true if you're wearing an SCBA. Wearing an SCBA for hazmat, firefighting, those kinds of things. And I'm totally used to it. Doesn't bother me at all. I have every confidence when I put that mask on, the first breath I take, that I'm going to get air, right? But a lot of people, they put that mask and I see that ceiling over their face, they get this dread like, oh my God. And it's a very real thing. It's a very, very real thing. Irritation, allergy, a lot of times, respirators are made out of different things. Most of them are made of silicone now. Silicone's pretty hypoallergenic. Really, people just don't, most people aren't allergic to it. But, some people have very sensitive skin. So, if they get irritation or an allergy, it's going to affect it. One thing for all you beard lovers out there, look, beards are great. And if you can handle how scratchy and itchy they are when they're coming in, then, good for you. That's awesome. Um, that's the worst part for me of growing a beard is that crazy itchiness when it's coming in. But that crazy itchiness is even worse when you've got dry air blowing on your skin, using an SCBA. The other thing too is that when you have a lot of facial hair and stuff, you don't get a good seal, okay? And that can, so not only can you get irritation from the dry air on your facial area and your beard area, you also, you're not getting a good seal. So, you may have to give up the beard if you're going to wear a respirator. All right. Medical evaluation on the doctor's side, okay? So the doctor is going to look at, uh, basically it's a questionnaire. And they're going to go through and they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. Most of the time, they just have the person that's going to wear it fill out the questions. Anything they answer yes to, they're going to follow up on. So if they notice that you say you have very sensitive skin, or you are claustrophobic, or you have any of these things, then they're going to actually talk to you more, do some testing, some questions, that kind of thing, and see where you are with it. Now, with this initial medical examination, it excuse me, with that first medical evaluation, that's usually uh, very, very, very thorough. It should be. So you need to have somebody that is a physician or somebody. Thank you so much. Uh, yeah, the winter weather is really yeah, wreaking havoc with me. Let's see. Uh, okay, we got a question here from Thomas. Any opinion on the online fit testing? I'll be honest with you, Thomas. I didn't even know there was such a thing as online fit testing. If you're talking about you put the mask on and you plug it in, and then they do an analysis for free. But I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, Daniel says online will not qualify for OSHA standards. It won't. If you want to do it as a quick and dirty, that's up to you. But we're going to get more into fit testing. This isn't the fit testing part. This is just medical evaluation part. We're going to get to fit testing, I promise you. Okay. So with that medical evaluation, all right, someone else here with this online evaluations. This is totally new thing here. We do online evaluation instead of doctor visit. Is that okay? Look, it has to be performed by a physician, and that means that a physician has to look at the person. You can fill out a questionnaire. I'm guessing what this is filling out a questionnaire online. You send it to a guy who's a doctor, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that looks great." Look, you can get prescription meds online from a doctor, and pay 5 times what they would the street value of them if you just go into a Rite Aid or something. I don't know about the efficacy of these doctors or anything else, right? Online doctor evaluation, this is the first I've ever heard of it, to be totally honest with you, right? All I know is that with our standard, you really need to go see a professional doctor, right? White coat, stethoscope, you know, say that kind of doctor, right? A real honest to God doctor. Now, a lot of places actually have a uh, occupational medicine, and with an occupational medicine doctor, you can go and they will do the evaluation and cut you a deal. Maybe it's not going to be like a regular office visit. So, um, yeah, you know, Jessica's got a question. Okay, all right. So hold on, we got a whole bunch of questions. Please check on this. I have a local doctor look at the questionnaire and request to see employees if it thinks it's necessary. Please check on this. Uh, you know, Look, you're supposed to have a medical evaluation. If you got a relationship with a doctor, he looks at the questionnaire and he's willing to sign off on it. It's like a professional engineer. A PE puts his stamp on something, then if something happens, if he creates a building and he puts his stamp on it that this building's good to go and that building collapses, guess who's liable for it? That engineer. So if you got a doctor who's just willing to sign stuff like, hey, yeah, this looks great. All right, cool. Yeah, no problem. You know, that's going to fall on him. And believe me, if something happens and you are really, you know, just lackadaisical about these kinds of things, it will come back to get you. If I can't appeal to your sense of, hey, doing right by your folks, listen, lawyers will tear, they tear people in these cases apart, right? Doctors, companies, anything. You have somebody that's on a job site, they hadn't been properly tested for a respirator, they hadn't gone through all of this, the records aren't there. The truth comes out because we will go in, we will do interviews, we will talk to folks. And if we go to the interview and we talk to people and we're like, okay, so when you had your respiratory evaluation, it's like, oh yeah, Dr. Fred said, hey, it was cool, man. So, hey, it was cool, man is not uh, a licensed professional, evaluation. So, you know, you can read the standard, you can interpret the standard, you can call one of our standards officers, they can interpret the standard. But I'm just telling you, Jessica's got a question. If we're in a hospital setting, can the medical evaluation uh, be reviewed by a nurse if eventually signed by a doctor? Yes, absolutely. OSHA has several letters of interpretation. Will not qualify unless physically seen. Daniel's absolutely right. So, um, you know, it's like those posters, right? People call up and say, yeah, buy this poster or pay us $95. You don't have to have that poster in this state. We will mail you the 2 posters that you need for absolutely free. It costs you nothing. So, don't believe everything that you hear, because, you really need to do your research on something like this. So I'm not sure who in NCDOL years ago told you that It was cool just to have, Dr. Fred say, yeah, man, that's sweet. I don't know. I can't tell you. But I can tell you that, like Daniel said, it's a lot of layers of interpretation. You have to be physically seen. Firefighter, we do annual fit tests. We collect quantitative results. No, we're not talking about fit testing yet. Everybody, listen. All right. We're going to go back. We're going back. And we're going back. All right. Notice E, medical evaluation. F, fit testing. Two different things. Before we ever get to fit testing, you have to be medically evaluated. That means you have to be seen by a doctor who's going to say, yes, you can wear this. No, you cannot. If they say that the person cannot wear a respirator, then there's no point in fit testing them, is there? So you just have to have medical evaluation by a qualified doctor. So, Yoko, we're gonna get to fit testing. Okay, fit testing totally different from being medically qualified, right? It's like, you know, why teach a blind man to drive if he can't get a license because he's blind, right? So if the doctor sees fit and says, hey, this guy might be okay, but we want to do a EKG on him, or we want to do a stress test, or maybe, we're worried about his heart, so, we want him to come and run on the treadmill and do a stress test so we can check his heart rate and all that stuff. They may require follow-up medical examinations. If so, then, whatever the doctor deems necessary. All right, so now selection of the mask. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the engineering controls or ventilation, right? What is the environment that we're working in? Number one. Number two, can we ventilate that environment to get rid of whatever contaminants, whether it's organic vapors, whether it's dust, whatever you got. How do we get rid of it? We can, if we can ventilate it to a scrubber, if we can ventilate it to the outside atmosphere, maybe there's a lot of different things that we can do. But can we use ventilation? And maybe we can use ventilation and that helps enough that we can then use administrative controls, right? We limit the time that someone's exposed so that they don't go above the PELs. That's another way to use it. When all else fails, then we go to personal protective equipment, and that is the use of a respirator. Now, hazards that require respirator use, obviously if it's an oxygen deficient atmosphere, you're going to have some sort of SCBA to sustain breathing. Also, if it's immediately dangerous to life or health, which is an IDLH atmosphere, or it's an unknown atmosphere, you may not know if it's an IDLH. This is why firefighters, when they respond to an event, they've got their SCBAs ready, and put those things when they're first going in there to a hazmat event. They're going to have gas meters. They're going to have oxygen level meters. They're going to have a lot of different tools that they can use to evaluate, okay, what are we dealing with here? But before they know, they need to just make the assumption that whatever we're dealing with is bad for our lungs and wearing an SCBA. So there can be a lot of different things. Chemical hazards, biological hazards. Two different things, two different types of masks and respiratory protection. Okay? When we're talking about chemical, that can be dust, fumes, vapors. It can be organic vapors. It can be ammonia. It can be, some sort of acid or strong base. Some sort of acid or strong base. But a biological hazard, that's going to be things like bacteria, funguses, fungi, things like that. And when we're talking about those, we're talking about, very, very fine, like HEPA filters, things that we can definitely keep these from entering the lungs. So we look at the contaminants. What are they? How do we deal with them? What are their physical properties? It's important to know, like, if it's dust, well, what particle size dust is it? Do I have a filter that's good enough to block all of that out? Any areas where there's potentially oxygen deficient atmosphere, we check that by using a gas meter. What's our oxygen content? And it will tell us. So based on all that criteria, that's how we select what respirators we're going to use. Uh, Again, they have to be Niosh certified, and you have to have sufficient number and sizes to correctly fit the user, right? You can't go with well, most everybody wears a medium, so we're just going to get, 20 mediums and then one large and one small, because inevitably you're going to have 3 or 4 people that, for some reason or another, they can't wear small, they can't wear large, or when you do the fit testing of the medium, they just don't get a good seal, which fit testing we're going to get to in a little bit. All right. For breathing air, sometimes we use compressors. Um, Again, if it's a compressor that's giving you fed air, you need to make sure that it's got a CO alarm, because you don't want to be pumping CO into an oxygen mask so the person thinks that they're breathing oxygen and instead they're breathing carbon monoxide. All right. You need to make sure that if you have an internal system, which a lot of companies will have an internal system, a lot of times they'll have house air, they'll have house breathing air, they'll have house nitrogen, they'll have a lot of different house gases, which are important, especially if you're working in a laboratory. But the big thing is that any of these fittings, you've got to make sure that your respirator fitting is not compatible with any of those, so that you cannot mistakenly plug that respirator into, say, nitrogen or, uh, you know, natural gas. Maybe you had a Bunsen burner in there. Who knows? And, whatever you've got. It could be regular air, just, it could be instrument air. It could be a lot of different things. You want to make sure that you're plugged into breathing air. Firefighters, again, we've got at least 2 employees enter IDLH atmosphere. We got 2 in, and we got 2 out, right? So with 2 in, 2 out, those 2 guys that are in there, or girls, whatever, the 2 folks that are in there, they have to remain in visual or voice contact with one another, and the 2 that are outside, they've got to be ready to go if there's an emergency. All right, you need to use pressure demand SCBAs, but again, now the one thing is, doesn't preclude, like it says, emergency rescue of human beings before entire team assembles. If you get there and you're the first one on the scene and you don't have 2 in, 2 out and all that, but there's human life at stake and you're running, and that's different. But structural firefighting, you need to have 2 folks in, 2 folks out. Ran this situation, the western part of the state, and where we had some firefighters go into a commercial building. 2 were in evaluating, they got separated, and one guy ended up dying. You know, he, collapsed, and for those of you that know about SCBAs, and you collapse, you don't move, you've got an alarm that goes off, and when that alarm goes off, it's pretty loud, so you can get in there and try to find that guy. Problem was that the 2 guys that were on the outside, the 2 in, 2 out, the 2 out guys were off doing other things. One was the chauffeur, or the guy that actually drives the truck and mans the all of the, watches the dials and gauges and does all the valve work and everything with the apparatus, okay? And the other guy was doing something at the fire hydrant. I have no idea what exactly, but um, they were like, oh well, the reason they didn't run in was they need to get their SCBAs and do all this stuff, and that's not what two in, two out means. Two in means there's two guys. Two out means there's two outside that are ready to go in the event of an emergency. So just remember that. So respirator, basically what a respirator does is it either A, filters the air so it's clean for you to breathe, or B, it supplies you uh, with air. Okay, one or the other. But one way or the other, you're going to have good air that you can breathe. Now, you got air purifying respirators. You can use a filter, cartridge, can, whatever. You also have supplied air respirators where you're going to have a compressor or you're going to have a bottle. Most, your SCBAs are designed, you've got a bottle, you can change the bottle out. But again, those are your two primary respirators. So when you look at an air purifying respirator, you can see there's a filtering face piece, which is basically, it's a filtering face piece. It's a glorified dust mask. Okay. You have a half mask with a respirator. You notice the two cartridges on the side. You have a full face piece respirator. This gives you eye protection as well. And then of course you have uh, this is a powered air purifying uh, respirator. And you can see our model in that one. He's wearing this, and basically it goes to a little HEPA filter thing on his back. Cindy, did you have a question? I noticed you tried to type something, and all I'm seeing is a period. Okay, very good. So a filtering face piece or a dust mask. Uh, Again, you're breathing through it. It captures particles, usually larger particles, dust, aerosols, mist. But when you're using a filtering face piece, okay, um, it's going to have an NRP. And so a lot of you have seen, I'm sure, these things that says, we need N95 respirators, right? Remember when we had the whole thing with the flu? And I forget what it was. It was a few years ago, and everybody was all bird flu. Maybe that was it. And everybody was all, oh man, I need N95 respirators. Well, what is an N95 respirator? Well, you have NRP and then a number that represents the efficiency. 99%, 95%, 99%, or 100%. Okay. Does it protect against gas or vapors? No, it does not. Absolutely not. And then, of course, when these things collect a certain amount of dust, after time they get pretty saturated, then you need to replace them. Julie asked a great question. Is there an actual expiration date for the filtering face pieces? Um, yeah, the manufacturer, they're going to actually determine that. The biggest reason is because when we look at these things, most of the time we just do a visual inspection. We're like, oh, there's absolutely nothing wrong with these. They actually can start to degrade over time, right? And I can tell you a good example, right? Those Tyvek suits, man, nothing affects that, right? Those things last forever and ever and ever and ever. Tyvek suit, it's just, they're awesome. But I learned that when you store them in the back of a van and it's very hot and the sun shines through on it and this goes on for years and years, guess what? They turn into basically tissue paper. And so, we went through and had a whole big old stock of these things that had been around since 9/11, and they were completely shot. I mean, they just tore apart like crepe paper. I mean, there was nothing to them. So they can start to break down. You know, it, again, it depends on the manufacturer. As far as replacement goes, how often they should be replaced, um, it basically it's according to use. If you're using them all day for 8 hours, you've got a face piece on, you're using it all day for 8 hours that day, you are really taxing it pretty heavily, especially if you're in a really dusty environment. If you can start, if you start tasting the dust or it starts getting hard for you to breathe, you need to replace it right then. Um, or, you can hang on to it and try to keep it clean, but, uh, you know, again, it just depends on how often you're using it and what the environment's like. Yes, these have to be um, fit tested, but remember, um, oh wow, yeah. See, now we're getting into the little thing. Van asked a great question. Does an Niosh N95 particle dust mask with no valve qualify as a respirator? And yeah, if it doesn't have that little respirator, or if it's not that design, doesn't have the valve and all that, it's not an N95 respirator. Again, we're talking about, these are basically measurements of particles that can get in with the NRP and what percentage of those can get in, 95, 99, or 100%. That's what separates them from just the common plain Jane dust mask. Now, some of these that are probably the most common ones that you see, and I'm sure you see them in the big box stores all the time now, are these full face piece and half mask respirators. Again, they can be used in atmospheres where you have dust and you have gases and vapors. Now, there are a lot of different cartridges that you can use. Gas vapor, ammonia, different acids, different bases, a lot of different things. They cannot be used in an IDLH atmosphere. Also, they can't be used in an oxygen deficient atmosphere because these are not supplying the air. They are simply purifying the air that you breathe. So the air that you breathe has to be, oxygen sufficient, and all you're doing is you're drawing that air in through a purifying medium that's going to filter out all the particles and all the garbage. So, oh, yeah, question. Um, let's see. Fit testing. Um, yep. Daniel made the comment. He says you should train your employees always. And, we are going to talk a bit more, I think, at the end of this about Appendix D, which, again, if this is a voluntary thing, you do need to get all your proper, have your program and, or, get all your proper signatures if you're not going to have a program. So that it is voluntary. All right, full face piece and half mask respirators. Same thing. They don't protect against airborne particles, but they can use chemical filters for gases and vapors. A lot of times these are used in a lot of different plants where having a shield and a mask and all these different things gets to be a bit much. If you've got one of these, then now you've got the full face mask that covers the eyes built in, and so you can just change the filters on that. Gives you one whole unit to wear as opposed to wearing multiple pieces of equipment. Again, the service life of this thing depends on a lot of different things. It depends on, in the case of, say, like a half mask respirator, really we're just looking at the filtering face piece, and the part that's going to wear on these is the cartridges over time, and then the rest of the mask, it can be cleaned very easily in a sink with just soapy water. With this one, now you've got the added thing of not only do you have cartridges that have to be replaced, but you also have a filtering face piece with a mask and a lens. So you can wash that and you can clean it, but if the lens gets scratched up and you can't see through it, now that could be a problem where that part either needs to be replaced or the whole mask needs to be replaced. If, a lot of times if the plastic mask, if you can't see through that, then most of the time it's time just to replace it. Now, the Purifying Respirator, again, this is like a HEPA filter. It's got a hose that connects on your face and it does the same thing. It is a air purifying respirator. So, how this works, it draws air into the unit like a vacuum cleaner. And then, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So, when that fan turns and it sucks air in, on the back end, it blows it out after it's filtered and it blows it up into the mask. Okay, so with that, you've constantly got a source of purified air. It can be, again, there's a lot of different ways they come. They have full, half face helmets, hoods, um, you know, but again, the one thing I always try to remind people with these things is that they are battery powered. You've got to make sure that you, if you're depending on this thing to work, that the battery pack is in good shape, right? Does it charge? Does it take a full charge? You know, these are the things that go out, because these pieces of equipment, if you take care of them, they'll last you a long time, but battery pack may not, because again, you charge the batteries, you charge them, and you charge them, and you charge them, but they only can be recharged so many times, and each time you charge them, it's less and less and less. It's just like your cell phone, right? You change your cell phone battery once a year. I got the new, Samsung Galaxy 7. First phone I've ever had that doesn't have a battery that you can take out and put another battery in its place. Now, who knows what's going to happen, when the battery wears out. Maybe there's a way to break it open. I don't know. But eventually, that battery is going to be shot, and that means the whole thing is kaput. So, keep in mind, battery. All right, your canister life. Everybody asks me, Andy, how long do these things last? And I tell them, hey, again, it depends on usage. And I know it's tough, and it sounds like a real politician answer, because you're not like trying to pin Jello to a wall. But the truth of the matter is that you so much of this depends on A, what the use is, B, the amount of use, C, the person, right? I you know I know our firefighter, they're in the group, right? Let me see, Yoko, right? Yoko Sorensen. Okay. Firefighters know, especially if you trained young firefighters, they all come in different shapes and sizes, right? In a firehouse, you're going to have dudes that are, they run a marathon every weekend. They're in great shape, and, they look like they could be on the cover of Fitness magazine, right? And then, you got like the older dudes that have been there for a while. Maybe they got a little bit of a gut, but they are the better cooks in the firehouse, to be honest with you. And, just different shapes, different sizes. Strong as a bull, right? Really important. Cardio is always important in a firehouse, but even with that, not everybody's exactly the same. So the exertion level that different folks have for different things can differ. I've seen guys that will make a 30-minute tank last an hour. I've seen guys that will burn through a 30-minute tank in 15 minutes. Again, the more used you are to wearing an SCBA, you can make that amount of air last more or less. Same is true for these little canisters. For these canisters, if you are breathing, say you're taking 12 breaths a minute, that's not very much at all. So you're not going to be pulling a lot of air through these cartridges. Versus if you're taking 112 breaths per minute, that's a lot more. You're going to go through it 10 times faster than the dude that's taking 12 breaths. Those are just extreme numbers just to, help prove the point. But the thing is that so much of this depends on that exertion level. Also, cartridges are different. Um, your temperature and humidity, if it's a hot, humid day versus a very dry day versus a very wet day? How many contaminants do you have? Do you have dust as well in the atmosphere? The more things that you have, and the more contaminants that you have, and the more dust that you have, and the more of your particles, how much is your air really saturated, right? If you have, maybe you're just 3 or 4 points above the Pell, not much, then you're not going to be really filtering a whole ton through these things. But let's say you're, say, 50 points over the Pell. Well, now you're going to be filtering a whole lot more, okay? So again, as far as these service life goes, it varies. One thing I can tell you, especially using an organic filter, if you can taste the solvent, then it's time to replace it, definitely. Okay, so with these things, we only want to use Niosh approved filters, okay? Because they have very, very, very specific uh, guidelines for the production and the usage of these filters. They're going to be labeled, color coded. Always keep the labels on there. Don't remove it. Okay. If you look at the one on top, you'll notice that it looks like just a yellow piece of tape on there. The thing is that it's this yellow piece of tape um, was just done to cover up the label, right, for copyright stuff. Uh, but that label always needs to be on that cartridge. So now, assigned protection factor, that is basically that's a level of respiratory protection that a respirator or a certain class of respirators is supposed to have or supposed to provide to employees. Okay, um, so APF is part of what you use when you are looking at what you've got in your environment. So when we look at, say, um, a PAPR versus an air purifying respirator, if you got a PAPR, you can see it's 50 versus 10 for a half mask. So which one gives you more? Well, obviously the PAPR, but is that really what you need? Because you really only need to have, when you calculate what your protection level is and how much you need, you know, you you need to have that. Can you go above and beyond it? Absolutely. Do you have to? You do not. But you need to make sure that you actually are within that assigned protection factor and that you are keeping that employee safe. Maximum use concentration, um, that is the maximum concentration in the atmosphere if you've got a hazardous substance that employee can be expected to proceed safely. Um, Again, you know, when you are wearing a respirator, you need to be aware of what that maximum use concentration is, because a respirator is not like a half mask respirator, full mask respirator, those kinds of things. They're not going to, keep you safe if you are simply, if you're simply above the maximum use. If you don't have an exposure limit, then you have to, determine MUC or maximum use based on the information that you got and just making a good professional judgment. Timothy's got a question. Does it matter exactly where the labels should be placed on the subcontainers, such as the boxes a mass quantity of material comes in? Well, I'm kind of talking more about the little cartridge. Little cartridge here, that guy, should have a label on it. So will this one, right? And typically it's on the side. It's in very, 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 very tiny print. Um, yes, there will be one on the box. Should be. and then typically they also have a label. But if you look here, you see where this yellow is on here? That is where the label would be on this one. And if you were looking at this one and you turned it over on its side, you would see the label on it. All right, so how do we figure out what our maximum use concentration is? Well, we can do it by mathematically by looking at the assigned protection factor, multiplying that times the PEL, all right, and the permissible exposure limit. That's going to give us a maximum use concentration. We can use the PEL, we can use a STEL or short-term exposure limit, or we can also use a ceiling limit. Excellent. Good. I'm glad we're all set. Part 4. Man, that was a long one, I know, but we're getting better. All right. So training. It's got to be done annually, right? Anytime that you got a change in the workplace, that is when you need to also make a change in your program. It could be new chemicals. It could be get rid of some chemicals. But again, at least annually, a lot of folks will go through and just go through, make sure what they're using, make sure everything is addressed by it. Depending on your job and depending on the place where you work, you may have a protocol for this. I know where I used to work, we would have anytime a new chemical would come on site, anytime we had a new chemical come on site, it had to go through a review to make sure that once it got here, um, we would be able to handle it. Because thank you so much. When the remember when you're offloading something, right? You take it off the loading dock and you take it out of the box in the laboratory. If it slips and breaks, and now you got to clean it up. If you don't have the proper things on hand to clean it up with, then now you got to clean it up. If you don't have the proper things on hand to clean it up with, then you're in rough shape, right? So, um, again, make sure that anytime you get something new, check your respiratory program. We train folks. We want to explain to them why they're using the respirator, what it can do, what its limitations are, what its capabilities are, how to use it, how to put it on an emergency, how to take it off, how to perform a seal check, how to properly maintain it and store it. Anybody that was in the service, ever went through gas mask training, they will tell you that is the one thing that they really drill into your head. How do you put it on? How do you put it on emergency? How do you check it? How do you maintain it? Because if you don't maintain it and you don't take care of it, that's your life, right? That's your life. So remember, your health is your wealth. You don't take care of yourself, you don't take care of the things that you depend on, to keep you safe, then that can cost you in the end. Fit testing. All right, I know a lot of you have had questions about fit testing, so here we go, right? So when do we fit test? Well, before we initially use it, and then annually thereafter, right? We want to do an annual fit test. Why? Because, people change. Now, sometimes we get folks that, their facial features change, like they gain weight, they lose weight, maybe they use dentures, maybe they lost some teeth, maybe you got glasses, right? If you got glasses and you wear an SCBA, and you are, oh, I always get this wrong. Maybe you are, well, it doesn't matter. Maybe you're nearsighted, maybe you're farsighted, whatever. But you might have to have a glasses insert inside of your SCBA now, right? So any of these things, whenever you throw something new into the mix, you need to do fit testing, all right? And some folks, very easy to fit test. Some folks, not easy at all to fit test. So qualitative, it's basically pass fail, right? You get out you haven't put on the mask, you break an ampoule of amyl acetate, which amyl acetate's just banana oil, very fragrant. You can smell it very easily, and basically you ask them, you're like, hey, what do you smell? If they say, I don't smell anything, that's good. If they say, I smell bananas, then you know, you got a leak, right? Now the problem is that if you have somebody that has no sense of taste or smell, then a qualitative fit test is really kind of useless, right? If you need a fit factor of 100 or less, qualitative fit test is fine. Okay, so we got a question here. When you conduct a fit test, must the employee be wearing all PPE they'll be wearing when they will be wearing their mask? For example, must they be wearing safety glasses? They'll conduct their fit test. No, it's only for the respirator. That's the only thing that you have to have. You put that respirator on, and you run the test. Now, quantitative fit test, this is what Yoko was talking about. Again, it actually gives you a number. It tells you how effective the fit is. So it's an assessment of the adequacy of the respirator fit by actually numerically measuring the amount of leakage into the respirator. Okay, that's the fit factor. You can use it for any type of respirator, and it must be used for respirators that require a factor of 500 or greater. So when you do this and you take a look at it and you get the results, again, when you have like an SCBA, quantitative fit test, right? Yoko will tell you, with fire department, that's what they use, right? You cannot just say use a qualitative one. You have to use a quantitative fit test, and you have to save those results and make sure you keep up with those results. All right, maintenance. Got to keep these things clean and sanitary. They're very easy to clean. They're usually very easy to disassemble and reassemble. That's one of the things you need to work with your employees. Okay, so respirators get cleaned and disinfected. You can set up whatever interval, but these are the ones that, within the standard, it recommends. If it's used by the employee, then as often as necessary to be maintained in sanitary condition. Basically, it's just saying, keep it clean. One of the worst things we see all the time is people will have respirators, half-mask respirators. They'll drag them around, leave them laying on tables, things like that. Remember, that face piece where they're putting their face right in it, that when you just leave it laying around, now it's exposed to everything. Different chemicals, different, dust, dirt, spill soda on it, whatever. You need to keep that thing clean. Remember, emphasize these people, you're putting this on your face way up close and intimate with it, right? So maybe you have employees. If it's a respirator that's shared by employees, then it's got to be cleaned and disinfected prior to each use by a different employee. Those are ones that are maybe for maintenance that, somebody gets stuck with occasionally. Um, if you use it for emergency, after every use, it's got to be cleaned. Why? Because it's got to be available and ready for the next time. If you're using it for training and for fit testing, then between each employee and at the end of the fit testing session. All right, Jessica's got a question. Let's see. We are currently doing quantitative fit testing with Vitrix or saccharin with hoods. We do a sensitivity test before fitting to make sure the employees can taste it. Is this acceptable for qualitative? Right. Qualitative, that's fine. Quantitative, that is not. But qualitative, yes. And that's a good idea to do the sensitivity test because, same thing. If you can't smell and you can't taste, then it makes a big difference. I can tell you right now, I got a bad head cold, and so my sense of taste is off, and I really can't smell much of anything. right? Even like, there are people in this building that, like bathe in perfume, and I'm always like, ooh, but this, today, yeah, I can't smell anything, so, like, whatever. So, um, big difference, right? Um, so Jessica, good call on that. Storage. Respirators have to be protected. It's the same thing I was just talking about, right? If you got that respirator and you just leave it out, again, it's exposed to dust, sunlight, heat, cold, moisture, chemicals. Most of the time, stuff like dirt, um, you know, like I said about the spilled soda, I've seen that in places. I've seen one where, a dude actually sat on another guy's respirator that was just there. He left it in the chair, and this guy sat in the chair. I mean, he sat in the chair on top of the respirator, right? And I'm thinking, man, I would not want to put my face there. And I told the guys working there, I'm like, okay, look at it this way. Would you put your face there? Uh, you know, so that's what you're doing when you leave your respirator just laying around in a chair and somebody sits on it. So again, keep it clean, keep it stored in a sealed bag. So what do we look for when we do an inspection? We're looking for holes in the filter, loss in elasticity of the straps. One thing we'll see a lot of times is the straps will be pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled to the point where they get all wrinkly on the side. They have absolutely no elastic left in them. They might as well just be tying them on with a ribbon. That elasticity helps keep that seal. And remember, we do our fit testing once a year. The problem is that, you know, what happens on the 364th day when the thing, is completely worn out because the person has not been taking care of it. So you got to make sure, do spot checks, ask to see respirators. If you see they're not being taken care of, then hey, do some counseling, do some training there. Notice the dirt in the valves, detergent residue. We would just have our guys fill sink up with some soapy water, clean everything, lay down a paper towel. You want to make sure you don't have dirt in the valves, dirt in the filters, things like that, because if you do, it's not going to operate properly. Oh, we got a question. Colleen asks, are painters allowed to have their respirators hanging around their necks and not in the storage bins when they are not actually using them? Or only, should they only either be in use or in the storage container? Okay, that's, we don't list or recommend one way or the other. What we recommend is when you go through and you're doing your training, explain to them how these things work and what they should do with them. I understand exactly what you're talking about. You got dudes that are painters, say they're doing spray painting, right? And they need to be wearing their mask. Well, a lot of times, they'll be spraying, and then as soon as they let the trigger go on the gun, they'll take the mask off. Well, you still have stuff floating around in the atmosphere, and it can deposit in that mask. Once it deposits in the mask, and then you've got a good seal, then you're breathing nothing but whatever's deposited in that mask. So, can they hang them around their neck? Sure, whatever. I mean, it's up to you. Whatever you feel comfortable with. But the thing is that you need, the best tool is education. And if you explain to them, look, as soon as you're done painting, after you let the dust settle for a minute or two, probably okay to take your mask off, but this is what's going on, right? This is what's still in the atmosphere, so that they have a better knowledge of it. Now, at the end of the day, Colleen brings up a great point. If you're using a mask in a dusty area, you might be okay with just taking it off at the end of the day and not thoroughly cleaning it, but just kind of brushing the dust off or something. But, what if you're working in a paint shop or something like that? Particles of paint getting inside the mask, getting inside the filters, getting in the valves, all these different things definitely affect the efficiency of the mask. So inspection. Respirators have to be maintained for emergency use, have to be inspected monthly. It's very important. A lot of times we'll have respirators that are for emergency use only, especially SCBAs, and they get put in a little cupboard, and everybody forgets about them. And so they sit there for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, there's been a leak, right? Or somebody dropped a bottle of methyl ethyl death. Now we got to go clean it up. It's like, oh, I'll grab the respirator, and then they get it, and the mask is falling apart. It's all dry rotted. All the black rubbers turn gray or white, and it's oh, you look at the gauge. Oh my gosh, it says 0. It's empty. Where do we go to fill these up again? Oh, okay. Yeah, we have to go to the fire department. All right. Well, now so much time has passed. What was the point of having that emergency SCBA in the first place? Make sure you check your SCBAs. One thing I tell folks is this: have a checklist. Make sure you just go through it. Beginning of every month, whatever works for you. But check your fire extinguishers, check your SCBAs, and check your AEDs, right? If you've got an automated external defibrillator, it won't work very well in your office if the battery's dead. So, again, make sure, put it on your inspection list. Anytime you got a repair, if you got a respirator that fails inspection, repairs should be made only by appropriately trained persons, and you should only use Niosh approved parts. So it's not like an SCBA. You probably want to go take that to a pro. A lot of these half masks and full masks made by North and different people, they're pretty easy to take apart and put back together with a set of directions. But again, it takes a little bit of training. But you can always invest in having your folks that get trained. Use. All right, so how do we use these things? Well, you always want to put that respirator on in a clean air environment because you don't want to trap all the particles and garbage inside of you. So if you go in the dusty environment and put it on then, well now you're going to be getting all that in the mask. So you put it on, you want to make sure that you check your seals using a positive pressure test or a negative pressure check. Make sure everything's good to go. They're only effective if you get a good tight seal, okay? So this is again why we say facial hair is not allowed when wearing tight-fitting respirator. Very important, right? Now, this is something that is always a bone of contention with so many folks, and so I'm not going to really go into it very much, except to say this. Excuse me. When you have facial hair, you're not going to get as good a seal. Now, will you get a seal that's good enough to pass? Maybe, right? With quantitative, you know for sure. With qualitative, you don't know, right? Um, you may ask them, what do you smell? And they know because they've done this 65 times that it's going to be banana smell. So they're like, oh, I don't smell anything. Don't make me shave my great big Grizzly Adams beard. So, no, no. If they need to wear a respirator, then, you got to choose. Either you're going to be a buck skinner or you're going to work at this job, but you can't do both. So, facial hair, not allowed when wearing a tight-fitting respirator. Can you wear a mask or can you wear a little mustache? Sure, you can wear a little mustache, that little 1980s, aviators mustache that goes right between the nose and ends at the corners of the mouth. That's not going to affect it. But great big giant beard, yeah, that affects it. Okay, so we've had people, come with us for everything under the sun. They're like, I can't shave my beard because of religious reasons. Well, then, I then you're in a scrape, right? I don't know what to tell you. So, but what I can tell you with this is that 1910 134 G1, yeah, no facial hair, okay? Because it's not because we're anti-beard, it's because we want people to actually have a respirator that works and you get a good seal. So if you're using it, you want to leave the atmosphere. If you smell or you taste something, your throat becomes irritated, maybe the face piece is leaking. Um, maybe you got an alarm that you've got an equipment failure, or maybe you're out of air. A lot of different things. Any of those things happen, get out of the atmosphere. Okay, so we got let's see. Um, got a comment here. I've had people get medical notes to keep their beards. Look, if you want to do that, it's up to you. If we see it, then yeah, you're facing citation, right? It's facial hair is not allowed if you're wearing a tight fitting respirator. Okay, now tight fitting respirator is a tight fitting respirator. So and that's really go on for days debating it. All right, program evaluation. You want to conduct workplace evaluation, and you want to make sure that you're talking with your employees. Make sure when you go through and you audit your own program that you got the appropriate respirators. Nothing's changed. If something has changed, do your respirators meet that? Most of the time, a lot of times it's yes, especially depending on what you're doing, right? If you're working in a laboratory or a plant or someplace like that where you're using solvents or you have dust or whatever, a lot of times you don't have real drastic shifts. But anytime you have a new chemical come on site, do your due diligence, look at the SDS sheets, determine what kind of potential issues you may or may not have with it, and just make sure you address them. Really straightforward. And choose the right respirator for the job, and make sure that your folks are taking care of those respirators. So record keeping. Oh, we got a question here. Where can you find the information for what respirator is correct for the hazard that you are working in? For example, we hang drywall, install insulation, finish the sand drywall, and install acoustic ceiling tiles. So, excuse me. Great question, Jason. First thing you're going to do is JHA, job hazard analysis. So, I can tell you just from using all these different things. With insulation, drywall, finishing and sanding drywall, I've done tons of that. That's how I paid my way through college. And with acoustic tiles, all these things, the biggest things that you're worried about is particles, right? So what kind of particles are you going to generate? How big are the particles? Is it going to be dusty? Answer to all these things is yes, 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 and yes. Now, things like drywall dust can be a nuisance, right? Big nuisance. Insulation, those are fiberglass fibers, right? So again, looking at what you're dealing with and what you're wearing, then that's how you choose what's correct. Now you can evaluate, you can look at half mass, full mass, you can look at the N95 respirators, a lot of different ones. You can also talk to the manufacturers. The manufacturers on their websites, they have everything listed, and they will tell you basically what the particle sizes are that you have to deal with. Also, Appendix D in the standard will help with that. And if you don't have a standard handy, you can always look it up online. It's going to be right there. But they were very, very good about that. Wow. Okay. So if I was in and out on all that, probably will just, I'll just go ahead and, email you. But the easiest thing is look it up online, Yours is a particle situation. You'll have to get a mask for particulates. Okay? Did you get that? Particulates. So with record keeping, you have a written program. It's very important that you have that and keep it organized. We have boilerplate ones that are available through our consultative site and on the OSHA website. Also, within that record keeping written program, you need to keep your fit test records, your medical evaluations, and your emergency use respirator inspection if you have those. Okay, if you got an emergency use respirator, then make sure you keep the records for checking that. If you have individual respirators, we keep those records as well. You want to address all these different things, how you select your respirators, what medical evaluation you're using. Just example, can be in there. Your fit testing, right? Okay, so Jason, I got JHA and mask for particulates. Perfect. That's perfect. What's your respirator that you're going to be using, and how do you maintain it? Also, do you have any other equipment? Maybe if you've got a SARS, or you've got a purified air respirator, any of these things. How do you maintain those? How do you take care of them, right? Also, what's your employee evaluation and also your program evaluation? When are you going to go back? And basically, all it's saying is all the different points that you just saw in this presentation, you can just write those up, and that's going to pretty much cover everything. We have boilerplate ones that you can use. A lot of individual private companies have ones that you can purchase. Which one's the best, which one's not, I don't know. But I can tell you this. The very best program, the very best program, write this down, it'll be on the final exam. The very best program is the program that you use. That's right. How many people saw that coming? The program that you use is the best program, because a lot of people will have a written program and they look at it once, either the day they get in the mail or the day that they finish writing it, and then that's the last time they look at it. It goes up on a shelf and never gets used again. Again, a written program is a living document. Needs to be updated, needs to be evaluated. Make sure that you're doing it. Make sure you're paying attention and you're focusing. Now, here's our last one, and this is the slippery of the slippery slopes. Of all the slippery slopes, this one is the slipperiest. This one is the black ice around the blind curve slippery slope, called voluntary use. If you follow this, you'll be in good shape. We get more questions about this than anything else. So for all respirators, the employee needs to determine that voluntary use is appropriate. And they need to make sure that whatever respirator they select is not going to be a bigger hazard than what it's preventing. Okay? So if you got a dust nuisance and it's just a nuisance, like Joey's sweeping the warehouse floor and it's real dusty, right? So what are you going to do about it, right? So it's like, okay, well, we put this dust mask on. Well, does he really need a dust mask? I mean, it's just dust on the floor. It's dirt. It's not a big deal. It's nothing dangerous, nothing poisonous, nothing like dust on the floor. It's dirt. It's not a big deal. It's nothing dangerous, nothing poisonous, nothing like that. Select the correct respirator. Make sure it's not going to cause more of a problem than what you're solving. Then give that employee the appropriate information that you'll find in Appendix D, all right, because this is a voluntary thing. Now, make sure you know all respirators except filtering face pieces, right? See two pictures there. That one, filtering face piece, mask, right? All respirators except filtering face piece, the employer must establish and implement a written program to address medical evaluations, training on maintenance, storage, and care. Because even if it's voluntary, you still need to do this, all right? Now, here's your appendices. Fit testing procedures right here in Appendix A. It's got it. It's really good. Appendix B, the user seal check procedures. Shows you how to use them, right? Does a great job. Again, one thing about the appendices that you'll notice throughout 1910 and 1926, regardless, is that some of them will say mandatory, some will say non-mandatory. These are mandatory, okay? So you want to use the fit testing procedures in Appendix A. Use the seal check procedures in Appendix B. Use the cleaning methods that you see there in Appendix B2. Appendix C, OSHA respirator medical evaluation questionnaire, mandatory. All right. So again, go a doctor, qualified person. Could be a LPN, could be whatever, but they have to fall within the guidelines that are listed very clearly in Appendix C about that questionnaire. Appendix D, information for employees using respirators but not required under the standard. Appendix D. Read this. This will help you. Mitzi has a question. So voluntary use of N95, you provide them with Appendix D, all right? Do they have to fill out the questionnaire or sign anything? Okay, let's go back and look at this. All right. For all respirators, except filtering face pieces, the employer must establish and implement a written program to address medical evaluations and training on maintenance, storage, and care. Okay, what's the difference? When you have a filtering face piece, this is something that you're really not going to maintain. You got a filtering face piece, you're not going to wash it out. You're not going to repair a strap on it, none of these things. You're just going to pitch it and take out a new one and put that on your face. Okay, so with the filtering face piece, they're available, just like the half masks are available. But if you're using anything but a filtering face piece, you have to have medical evaluation, training on maintenance, storage, and care. The one thing that I always encourage everybody to do with this is if you have because specific questions come up all the time with all of these programs. Call up our NC labor number and ask to talk to a standards officer. If you talk to a standards officer, they will give you a specific answer for your specific case because everybody has a very, very, very specific case. And it's hard to give a general ruling for a lot of things. But if you have something very specific that you have a question about, then you can certainly call standards and ask them. Let's see, what do we got here? Should have them sign the voluntary form, peace of mind. Those requirements are for voluntary use also, correct? Which requirements are for voluntary use also? Everything for voluntary use, again, like I said, this is always the most confusing for everybody, is Appendix D. You go to Appendix D, and you follow that, and it's voluntary use, then you're good to go. Remember, when you do your JHA, if you determine that respirators are not needed, and that means I've got data. So when the OSHA compliance officer comes there and he's like, hey, I noticed everybody here is wearing a dust mask, or they're wearing vapor cartridges and things like that, but you don't have a respiratory program, right? This is all voluntary. Why? Well, you can say, okay, look, here's the data. We're below the PELs here. 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 I monitored. I checked. Operation hasn't changed. Mounts haven't changed. Everything's fine. We're below the PELs. But, it's irritant, or the guys just want to wear it, or whatever, so it's voluntary, then good to go. He may decide, hey, I'm going to check this, right? And I'm going to set up my equipment and do some monitoring and all this stuff. And that's all cool. But guess what? When he gets the same results, then it'll be like, yeah, it's voluntary. They don't have to have this stuff. They're doing it, to provide for their employees, but they don't have to have it. Okay. We have made it on our great voyage across respiratory protection. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. It's been 90 minutes. So we talked about written respiratory program, how we select our respirators, how we maintain them, do medical evaluations, training employees, what our program evaluation is all about, going back, looking at it, how do we take care of it, how do we update it. Been through the whole 9 yards. Jessica, I'm sorry, your audio was cutting out. Did you say that an RN or LPN would be acceptable? Post your info, please. Can you send PowerPoint since it's not current? The PowerPoint will be back on the website. You'll just need to check it periodically. I do not know when it will be back on the website. I do know for a fact that it is being